From Jerusalem tonight, a political storm that has been building for months has burst into full view. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has released a video statement that is as defiant as it is controversial, drawing a sharp line between his government and those rallying against it. His words, heavy with accusation, compared anti-government protesters not to ordinary critics of power, but to fascist militias. The context of his remarks is important. Just outside the Prime Minister's residence, demonstrators gathered once again, demanding two urgent things: a deal to secure the release of hostages still held in Gaza and an end to the ongoing war. These are not small demands. They cut to the heart of Israel's political, military and moral debates. The rallies have drawn thousands, uniting families of hostages, political opponents and ordinary citizens who say the war has gone on for too long. But this weekend, the protests crossed a new threshold. A garbage bin set ablaze in Jerusalem was not contained. The fire spread, destroying a vehicle, and not just any vehicle, but one belonging to an Israeli army reservist. Police described the incident as a red line that has been crossed. Justice Minister Yariv Levin, one of Netanyahu's closest allies, went further, denouncing what he called terror on the part of the demonstrators. It is against this backdrop that Netanyahu appeared in a recorded message, his tone sharp, his accusations unrestrained. He began with a striking statement: "You talk about democracy, but you speak and act exactly like fascists." With that, the Prime Minister framed the protesters not as patriotic dissenters, but as enemies of democracy itself. It is a charge that cuts to the core of Israel's identity as a state that has long defined itself as both Jewish and democratic. To call fellow citizens fascists is to open a new, and some would say dangerous, chapter in Israel's political discourse. Netanyahu did not stop there. He acknowledged that protest in itself is legitimate, but in his view, the demonstrations are no longer ordinary acts of free expression. As he put it, in a democracy, protest is legitimate. But what is happening in the funded, organised political demonstrations against the government has crossed every boundary. This was a message designed to resonate with his supporters. For months, Netanyahu has argued that the protests are not grassroots expressions of discontent, but carefully orchestrated political manoeuvres designed to topple his government. The word funded hints at accusations that outside actors, perhaps wealthy elites or rival political forces, are fueling unrest. The phrase crossed every boundary echoes the police warnings, a claim that the demonstrations are no longer safe or lawful. But perhaps the most striking section of Netanyahu's remarks came when he described the tactics of the demonstrators. He said, "They vandalize property, they block roads, they cause misery to millions of citizens and chase after elected officials." Here, the Prime Minister painted a picture of chaos, streets blocked, daily life disrupted, leaders hounded in public. His words were not merely descriptive, they were accusatory, meant to cast the protesters as destabilizers of society, enemies of order. And then came the most dramatic accusation of all. Netanyahu declared, "They threaten day after day to murder me, the Prime Minister, and my family, and they also engage in arson. They have also said they would surround my home, the Prime Minister's residence, with a ring of fire, just like fascist militias." This is more than rhetoric. By invoking threats to his family and referencing arson, Netanyahu sought to personalize the conflict. To compare demonstrators to fascist militias is to place them not in the category of citizens with grievances, but in the realm of enemies of the state. It is language that deliberately escalates tensions. The reference to a ring of fire around his residence is particularly loaded. It conjures images not of democratic protest, but of siege, of warfare, of lawless violence aimed directly at the heart of government. Critics of Netanyahu were quick to push back, saying the Prime Minister is inflaming divisions at a moment when unity is needed most. They argue that protests, even loud, disruptive protests, are part of the democratic fabric of Israel, especially when citizens believe the government has failed to deliver on its promises. Families of hostages say the demonstrations are born not of politics, but of desperation, the desperation of mothers, fathers and children who have waited months for their loved ones to return from Gaza. Yet the government insists that lines have been crossed. The burned car, the blocked roads, the anger spilling into the streets. For Netanyahu and his ministers, these are not simply signs of civil unrest, but markers of danger to the very state itself. This confrontation between leadership and citizens comes at a time of enormous strain. Israel continues its war in Gaza, a campaign that has stretched on with devastating humanitarian consequences and international criticism. Domestically, the cost is measured not only in soldiers' lives and resources, but in the emotional toll carried by the hostage families, whose pleas have grown louder with every passing week. And so the protest movement has become a mirror of the nation's divides, those who believe Netanyahu's government is protecting Israel's survival, and those who believe it is dragging the country into endless conflict while neglecting the plight of the hostages. The Prime Minister's language on this night made one thing clear. He sees himself not merely as a leader facing opposition, but as a commander under siege. His framing of the protesters as fascists, vandals and arsonists is designed to harden public opinion, to delegitimize the movement, and perhaps to prepare the ground for harsher responses by police or the judiciary. Meanwhile, outside the official residence, the protests continue. Chants, banners, the flicker of flames. These images dominate nightly news broadcasts, serving as both inspiration and alarm, depending on one's political stance. For Netanyahu, the path forward seems to be one of confrontation. For the protesters, it is a test of endurance and resilience. And for the Israeli public, it is a reminder that the struggle for democracy, security, and national unity is far from over. This is not the first time Israeli politics has been so polarized, nor will it be the last. But the intensity of these accusations, the Prime Minister of Israel calling his own citizens fascists, signals a moment of extraordinary volatility. And so the question hangs in the air tonight. Can a democracy survive when its leaders and its people no longer speak the same language, when their narratives of legitimacy diverge so sharply, when both sides accuse the other not just of being wrong, but of being dangerous? From Jerusalem, this is the story of a nation at the edge of confrontation, a story still unfolding, with consequences that will ripple far beyond the Prime Minister's residence and into the very heart of Israel's future. You talk about democracy, but you speak and act exactly like fascists. In a democracy, protest is legitimate, but what is happening in the funded, organised political demonstrations against the government has crossed every boundary. They vandalise property, they block roads, they cause misery to millions of citizens and chase after elected officials. They threaten day after day to murder me, the Prime Minister, and my family, and they also engage in arson. They have also said they would surround my home, the Prime Minister's residence, with a ring of fire, just like fascist militias.